holding a curry-flavoured novelty condom in one hand and an erect penis, his penis, in the other. I can be accurate on this. Not because I was sitting in carriage C, staring at the toilet in use sign, bladder threatening to burst, wondering what kind of person could be selfish enough to hog the bog for the best part of 20 minutes, and not because the track vibrations on the approach to Reading became so intense that I marched up to the toilet door and gave it a good kick and saw what was going on inside, but because that young man was me. Okay, so right now it would be fair enough to assume that I could be any one or possibly all of the following. A pervert. B, a curry lover. C, a lunatic. And, on the information disclosed so far, these are fair enough assumptions. Any jury would probably have convicted me on all three counts. Though, on the curry-loving charge, the fact that I could barely touch my knee with my mouth, let alone any other part of my anatomy, may have raised a reasonable doubt. So bring on the defence. 17-year-old men, as any man who's successfully and no doubt gratefully evolved beyond that age can vouch for, are strange creatures. Stretched between adolescence and maturity, and doused with hormones by the bucketful, it's an age of self-discovery, where questions are asked, answers are sought, and frequent masturbation is indulged in on the side. It was no different for me. I asked the usual questions. Does God exist? Can there ever be world peace? Why does pubic hair have a finite length, thereby denying the possibility of pelvic topiary? And wouldn't it be gross if boil in the bag was just what it said? And I waited in vain for the answers. And in between waiting, I jerked off. A lot. There were probably prize dairy cows whose yield was less than mine, but considering the fact that they would only have been milked twice a day, this isn't so astounding. On average, i.e., excluding fire, flood, earthquakes, and other acts of God, I jerked off 3 times a day. And variety was the spice. I spanked the monkey over the bathroom basin. I strummed the banjo on the back of the bus. I choked the chicken under the duvet. I bashed the bishop during songs of praise. I jerked, I squirted, I wanked, I tossed, I tugged, and I glopped. But throughout this period of onanistic experimentation, there was one thing I'd never tried. The rich man's wank. For anyone unfamiliar with this term, the RMW is simply performing the act of masturbation whilst wearing a condom. Precisely what this has to do with rich men, I'm not sure. I can only assume it's a habit brought on by having too much time on their hands. Too much something, anyway. For me, though, on the 15th of May 1988, in the far-from-erotic environment of the British Rail toilet between carriages B and C, it served another purpose. It was the condom itself, not what it was designed to act as a barrier against, that interested me. The plain fact of the matter was that I'd never tried one on before. My contact with them had so far been restricted to watching with admiration as my school friend Keith Rawlings had performed his then legendary party trick of stretching a condom over the top half of his head and hyperventilating through his nose until the condom swelled up like a zeppelin and finally went the way of the Hindenburg, exploding to a round of astounded applause. Now, whilst I could see the impressive theatricality of such a feat, it wasn't a party audience I was planning to impress that day. It was Mary Rayner, a girl I'd met at a party at Matt's parents' house the weekend before, a girl who lived in London, and a girl who'd invited me to stay with her whilst her parents were away in Mallorca. A girl, in other words, who I had high hopes would be charitable enough to relieve me of my virginity. Hence the curry-flavoured condom. In the toilet. On the train. In less than 2 hours there was the possibility that I might be called upon to use one.